I left Bristol on June 20th, 1702, in a ship which was sailing to India. We had good sailing weather until we reached the Cape of Good Hope in South Africa, where we landed to get fresh water. We had to stay there for the winter, however, because the ship needed repairs and the captain was ill. In the spring, we left Africa and sailed round the island of Madagascar into the Indian Ocean. But on 19th April, the wind began to blow very violently from the west, and we were driven to the east of the Molucca Islands. On 2nd May, the wind stopped blowing and the sea was calm, but our captain, who knew that the part of the world was very well, warned us that there would be a storm the next day. So we prepared the ship as well as we could and waited. The captain was right. On 3rd May, the wind began to get stronger. It was a wild, dangerous wind blowing from the south this time. We had to take down our sails as the storm hit our ship. Huge waves crashed onto us, and the wind drove our helpless ship eastwards into the Pacific Ocean. For several days we struggled with the wind and waves, but at last the storm died away and the sea was calm again. Luckily, our ship was not badly damaged, but we had been driven over 2,000 kilometers to the east. None of us knew exactly where we were, so the captain decided to continue sailing eastward, where we had never been before. We sailed on for another 2 weeks. Finally, on 16th June 1703, we saw a large island with a small piece of land joined to it. I later discovered that this country was called Brobdingnag. The captain sent some of his sailors in a boat to land there and bring some fresh water. I went with them because I was interested in seeing a new country. When we were delighted to be on land again, and while the men looked for a river or a lake, I walked for about a kilometer away from the beach. When I returned, to my astonishment, I saw that the sailors were already in the boat. They were rowing as fast as they could towards the ship. I was going to shout to tell them they had forgotten me, when suddenly I saw a huge creature walking after them into the sea. I realized he could not catch them because they had nearly gone to the ship, but I did not wait to see the end of that adventure, as I ran away from him as fast as possible and did not stop until I found myself in some fields. The grass about 7 meters high and the corn about 13 meters high. It took me an hour to cross just one field, which had a hedge at least 40 meters high. The trees were much taller than that. Just as I was trying to find a hole in the hedge so I could get into the next field, I saw a giant coming towards me. He seemed as a tall mountain, and every one of his steps measured about 10 meters. In fear and astonishment, I hid in the corner and hoped he would not notice me. He shouted in a voice like thunder, and 7 other giants appeared. They seemed to be his servants. When he gave the order they began to cut the corn in the field where I was hiding. As they moved towards me, I moved away. But at last I came to a part of the field where rain had knocked down the corn. There was no longer anywhere for me to hide, and I knew I would be cut to pieces by the giant's sharp knives. I lay down and prepared to die. I could not stop thinking myself about Lilliput. There I myself had been a giant and important person who had become famous for helping the people of that small country. Here it was the opposite. I was like a Lilliputian in Europe, and I began to understand how a very small creatures feel. Suddenly, I noticed that one of the giants who was very close to me, as his huge foot rose over my head, I screamed as loudly as I could. He looked around the ground and finally saw me. He stared for me at a moment, then very carefully he picked me up with a finger and a thumb and looked at me. I was not 20 meters up in the air, and I desperately hoped he would not decide to throw me in the ground. I did not struggle and spoke politely to him, although I knew he did not understand any of my languages. He took me to the farmer who soon realized that I was not an animal but an intelligent being. He carefully put me in his little pocket and took me home to show to his wife. When she saw me, she screamed and jumped back in fear. Perhaps I was thinking I was an insect, but in a little while she became used to me and was very kind to me. Soon after we arrived, the whole family sat down at the table for dinner. There was a large piece of meat on a plate about 10 meters across. The farmer put me on the table with some small pieces of bread and meat in front of me. I was very frightened of falling off the edge of this table, which was 10 meters off the ground. The farmer and his family were delighted to watch me eating food with my own small knife and fork. But when I started walking across the table to the farmer, his youngest son, a boy of about 10, picked me up by the legs. He held me so high in the air that my whole body trembled. Fortunately, his father took me away at once and angrily hit the boy hard on the head. But I remembered how cruel children can be to small animals, and I did not want the boy to take his revenge on me. So I fell on my knees and asked him to not punish the child anymore. They seemed to understand. Just then I heard a noise behind me. It sounded like 12 machines running at the same time. I turned my head and saw a huge cat, 3 times larger than one of 4 cows. Farmer's wife held it in the arm so that it could not jump at me. But in fact, because I showed no fear, there was no danger, and the cat even seemed a little afraid of me. At the end of dinner, a servant came in with the farmer 1-year-old son in her arms. He immediately started crying and screaming because he wanted to play with me. His mother smiled and put me in his hand. When he picked me up and put my head in his mouth, I shouted so loudly that he dropped me. Luckily, I was not hurt, but it showed how dangerous life was going to be in Brobdingnag. After eating, the farmer, or my master, as I shall call him back, went back to his work in the fields. I think he told his wife to take good care of me because she put me carefully on her bed and locked the bedroom door. I was exhausted and slept for 2 hours. When I woke up, I felt very small and lonely in such a huge room and on such large bed. Suddenly, I saw 2 huge rats run toward me across the bed. One came right my face, so I pulled out my sword and cut open his stomach. The other ran away at once. I walked up and looked down on the bed to control my trembling leg. Looked at the dead rat. It was large as a big dog, and its tail measured about 2 meters. When my master's wife came into the room sometime later, I showed her how I killed the rat. She was delighted that I was not hurt and threw the dead rat out of the window. My master had a daughter who was about 9 years old. She was given the special responsibility of taking care of me. and I owe her my life. During my stay in her country, we were always together, and she saved me from many dangerous situations. I called her Glumdalclitch, which means little nurse. She was good at sewing and managed to make some clothes for me in the thinnest material available. She also made me a small bed which was placed on a shelf too high for rats to reach. Perhaps the most useful thing she did was to teach me the language so that in a few days I could speak it quite well. Soon all my master's neighbors were talking about the strange little creature he had found in a field. One of them came to see me, and as I walked towards him across the table, he put on his glasses. His eyes behind the glasses looked like the full moon shining into windows. I thought this was very funny and laughed loudly. Unfortunately, that made him very angry. I heard him whispering to my master all evening, and I was sorry I had laughed. Next day, Glumdalclitch came to me in tears. You'll never guess what happened, she told me sadly. Our neighbor has advised father to show you to people for money. Father's going to take you to market tomorrow, where there will be crowds of people ready to pay entertainment. I'm so ashamed, and perhaps you'll get hurt. Other people won't be as careful with you as I am. Don't worry, Glumdalclitch, I replied. As I'm a stranger here, I don't mind being shown to people like a strange wild animal. I do not I must do what your father wants. I was secretly hoping I would one day find a way of escaping and returning to my own country. So the next day, my master and his daughter got on their huge horse. Glumdalclitch carried me inside a small box which had air holes so I could breathe. When I arrived at the market town, my master hired the largest room in the public house, and and placed me upon the table there. His daughter stayed close to me to make sure that nobody hurts me. I was I was told to speak their language, pull out my sword, drink from a cup, and do other things to amuse the crowd. Only 30 people were allowed to see me at one time. On that first day, everyone wanted to see me, and I was shown to over 350 people. My master's plan was so successful that he arranged to show me again on the next market day. I did not look forward to this at all. I was so tired with the journey and the entertainment that I could only walk and speak with the difficulty for the next 3 days. When we were at home, neighbors and friends from all parts of the country came to look at me, and my master made me work hard to amuse them, so I almost had no rest. My master finally realized that he could make a fortune by showing me to people all over the country. So about 2 months after my arrival in Brobdingnag, we left the farm and started our journey to the capital. As before, Glumdalclitch came with us to take care of me. On the way, we stopped in many towns and villages so that I could be shown to the peoples. At last, after a journey of nearly half 5,000 kilometers, we arrived at the capital. Now I had to work even harder as people came to look at me 10 times a day. Although Glumdalclitch tried to make things as comfortable as possible for me, such an exhausting life was beginning to have a bad effect on my health. I was becoming thinner and thinner. When my master noticed this, he thought I would not live much longer, but it was clear that he wanted to make as much money out of me as he could. While he was thinking how to do this, he was asked to bring me to the palace. The queen and her ladies had heard about me and wanted to see me. When we arrived in front of the queen, I fell on my knees and begged to be allowed to kiss her foot. But she kindly held out her hand to me. I took her little fingers in both of my arms and put it very politely to my lips. She seemed very pleased with me, and finally she said, "Would you enjoy living here in the palace, do you think?" "Great queen," I answered. "I must do what my master wants, but if I was free, I would want to spend my whole life obeying your orders." She immediately arranged to buy me from my master. He was delighted to receive a good price for me, especially as he felt for sure I would not live longer than a month. So I also begged the queen to let Glumdalclitch stay with me because she had always taken good care of me. The queen agreed, and Glumdalclitch could not hide her happiness. When my master had left the palace alone, the queen said to me, "Why didn't you say goodbye to him? And why did you look so at him so coldly?" "Madam, I must tell you," I replied, "that since he found me, my master has used me as an easy way of making money for himself. He's made me work so hard that I feel tired and ill. Soon he sold me to you only because he thinks I'm going to die soon. But I feel better already now that I belong to such a great and good queen." The queen was clearly surprised to hear such an intelligent words from such a small creature, and decided to show me to her husband. When the king saw me, he thought I must be a mechanical toy. However, when he heard my answers to his questions, he realized I must be alive, and he could not hide his astonishment. He discovered what kind of animal I was. He for three of his cleverest professors, after looking at me carefully, then decided that I was a creature outside the laws of nature. I was much too small to climb their tree or dig their fields or kill and eat their animals. They could not understand where I had come from or how I could possibly survive. And when I told them that in my country there were millions just like me, they did not believe me, but just smiled. However, the king was more intelligent than they were. After speaking to Glumdalclitch and asked her and questioning me again that my story must be true, they took very good care of me. The queen's workmen made a special bedroom for me. It was a wooden box with windows and doors and two cupboards. The ceiling could be lifted off so Glumdalclitch could change my sheets and tidy my room. The workmen even made me two little chairs and a table, and a lock for the door so that no rats could get in. The queen became so fond of me that she could not possibly eat without me. My small table and chair were always placed on the dinner table near to her left elbow, and Glumdalclitch stood near me in case I needed her help. I ate off tiny silver plates with silver knives and forks, but I never got used to seeing the queen in one mouthful. She ate much as 12 English farmers could eat a whole meal. She drank a cup from as big as one of four barrels, and her knives were like huge swords. I was quite frightened of them. On Wednesday, which is a day of rest in Brobdingnag, like our Sunday, and the Queen and King always had dinner together with their children in the King's room, when I was usually invited to. My little chair and table were at the King's left elbow. He enjoyed very much hearing me talk about England, our laws, our universities, our great buildings. He listened so politely that I perhaps talked a little too much about my dear country. In the end, he looked at me kindly but could not stop himself laughing. He turned to one of his lords. "How amusing it is," he said to him, "that an insect like this should talk of such important matters. He thinks his country is so highly developed. But I suppose even tiny creatures like him have a hole in the ground that they call a home. They are given that love, they fight and they die as we do. But of course, the poor little animals aren't on to our level." I could not believe what I was hearing. He was laughing at my country, a country famous for its beautiful cities, palaces, its great kings and queens, its brave and honest people. However, there was nothing I could do about it, and I simply had to accept the situation. The worst problem I had at the palace was the queen's dwarf. Until I arrived, he had always been the smallest person in the country. He was about 10 meters tall, as I was much smaller than him. He was very rude to me and behaved very badly, especially when nobody was looking. Once he took a large bone from the table and stood it on my queen's plate. Then he took me in both hands and pushed my legs on into the top of the bone. I could not pull myself out and had to stay there feeling and looking extremely stupid. When the queen finally saw me, she could not stop herself like laughing, but she was angry with the dwarf and at the same time. In Brobdingnag there are large number of flies in summer, and these awful insects, each as big as an English bird, gave me no peace. The dwarf used to catch some in his hands, then let me them out suddenly under my nose. He did this both to frighten me and amuse the queen. I had to use my knife to cut them into pieces as they flew around me. Another time the dwarf picked me up and dropped me quickly into a bowl of milk in the table. Luckily I am a good swimmer, so I managed to keep my head out of the milk. As soon as Glumdalclitch saw I was in danger, she ran from the other side of the rooms to rescue me. I was not hurt, but this time the dwarf was sent away from the palace as a punishment. I was very pleased. Now, like to describe Brobdingnag, the people who draw our European maps think there's nothing but sea between Japan and America, but they are wrong. Brobdingnag is such a large country, joined to the northwest America, but separated from the rest of America by high mountains. It is about 10,000 kilometers long and 5 to 8,000 wide. The sea around is so rough, and there are so many rocks in the water that no large ship can land on of the beaches. This means that the people of Brobdingnag do not normally have visitors from other parts of the world. There are 51 cities and a large number of towns and villages. The capital stands on both sides of a river and has more than 80,000 houses. It covers 340,000 square kilometers. The King's Palace covers about 11 square kilometers. The main rooms are 80 meters high. The palace kitchen is huge. If I described it with its great pots on the fire and the mountains of food on the tables, perhaps you would not believe me. Travelers are often accused of not telling me the truth when they return. To avoid this happening to me, I am being careful to describe what I saw as exactly and careful as possible. Because I was so small, I had several dangerous accidents during my stay at the palace. One day, Glumdalclitch put me down on the grass in the palace garden while she went for a walk with some of the queen's ladies. As a small white dog, which belonged to one of the gardeners, appeared and seemed very interested in me. He took me in his mouth and carried me to his master. Luckily, he had been very well trained and did not try to bite me, so I was not hurt. One day, the queen said to me, "It would be good for your health to do some rowing or sailing. What do you think? Would you like to arrange it for you, madam?" I answered, "I'd love to row or sail a little every day, but where can I find a boat that's small enough?" "Leave that to me," she replied, and called for her workmen. She ordered them to make a tiny boat with sails. They also made a wooden container about 100 meters long, 17 meters wide, and 3 meters deep. This container was filled with water, and I carefully placed my boat on the water every day so I used to row or sail there while the queen and her ladies watched. There was no wind, of course, but the ladies blew hard to move my boat along. I nearly lost my life again. When a lady picked me up to put me in the boat, she was not careful enough and dropped me. With horror, felt myself falling through the air, but instead of crashing to the ground, I was caught by my trousers in a pin of her clothes. I had to stay there without moving a finger until Glumdalclitch came running to rescue me. But the greatest danger to me in the Brobdingnag came from a monkey. One day, Glumdalclitch left me alone in her bedroom while she visited some of her ladies. It was a warm day and her windows were open. I was in the box which I used as my bedroom with the doors open. Suddenly, I heard the noise of an animal jumping through the window, and immediately I hid at the back of my box. The monkey, which appeared huge to me, very soon I discovered my hiding place. When he picked me up and held me close to him like a baby, when he heard someone opening the bedroom door, he jumped out of the window and ran onto the roof. I thought I had never been in such great danger. He was running on three legs and holding me in the fourth. At any moment he could let me fall, and we were at the last 300 meters above the ground. I could hear a lot of shouting in the palace. The servants had realized that I was shouting in the palace. The servants had realized what was happening and brought the ladders to climb up onto the roof. Glumdalclitch was crying, and hundreds of people were watching me from the garden. Meanwhile, the monkey was sitting calmly on top of the roof. He was taking food from his mouth and trying to push into my mouth. He still seemed to think I was his baby. I suppose it was an amusing sight for the crowd below, but I was in terrible fear of falling. Finally, several servants climbed onto the roof, and as they came nearer, the monkey put me down and ran away. I was rescued and brought down to the ground. I had to stay in bed for 2 weeks after this. Before I felt well enough to meet the people again, the monkey was caught and killed. When I next saw the king, he asked me about this experience. "How did you feel?" he said, "when the monkey was holding you up on the roof?" "Sir," I replied bravely, I was afraid, that's true. But next time an animal like that attacks me, I shall not hesitate. I'll pull out my sword like this and show them what I would do, and give the creature a wound that it will never come near me again. But while I waved my tiny sword in the air, the king and his lords laughed loudly. I had wanted to prove my bravery, but I failed because to them I was only an unimportant little creature. I realized that later that this was often happens in England when we laugh at someone of no family, fortune, or intelligence who pretends to be an important as our great leaders. In the next few weeks, I began to have some very interesting conversations with the king. He was an intelligent and understanding person. Tell me more about your country, he said to me one day. I would like to hear about your laws, your political life, and your customs. Tell me everything. There may be something that we can usefully copy here in Brobdingnag. I shall be delighted, sir, I answered proudly. Our king controls our three great countries, Scotland, Ireland, and England. We grow much of our own food, and our weather is neither too hot or cold. There are two groups of men who make our lords. One is called the House of Lords, and they are men from the greatest families in the country. The other is called the House of Commons. These are the most honest, intelligent, and sensible men in the country, and are freely chosen by the people. We have judges to punishments for criminals, and we have a large army which cannot be defeated by any other in the world. While I was talking, the king was making notes. For several days, I continued my explanation, and I also described British history over the last 100 years. When the king asked me a large number of questions, these were some of them. How do you teach and train young people of good family? If the last son of an old family dies, how do you make new lords for the House of Lords? Are these lords really the most suitable people to make the country's laws? And in the House of Commons, are these men really so honest and intelligent? Do rich men never buy their way into this house? You say the lawmakers receive no pay, but are you sure that they never accept bribes? Then he asked questions about our lockers. Why are your trials so long and expensive? How much do your lawyers and judges really know about the laws? How carefully do they decide between right and wrong? And why, he went on, are you so often at war? Either you enjoy fighting or you have very difficult neighbors. Why do you need an army at all? You would not be afraid of any other country if you're peaceful people. And in the last 100 years, you've done nothing but rob, fight, and murder. Your recent history shows the very worst affection, cruelty, jealousy, dishonesty, and madness. I tried to answer the king as well as I could, but he did not think her system was a good one. No, my little friend, he said kindly but seriously. I'm sorry for you. You proved that to me that your country has nothing valuable to offer for us. Perhaps once in the past, your political life was adequately organized, but now it is clear that there were laziness and selfishness in every part of the system. Your politicians can be bribed, your soldiers aren't really brave, your judges and your lawyers are not neither reasonable nor honest, and your lawmakers themselves know little and do less. So, I sincerely hope that you have spent most of your life traveling, have a better character than most Englishmen. But from what you've told me, I'm afraid that your countrymen are the worst little nations of insects that has ever crawled upon the ground. I'm very sorry to have to report these words of the kings and I only do so of my love of the truth. I must tell him you what happened, even if I do not agree with it. I had to listen patiently while he was giving me his extraordinary options of my dear country. We must remember, however, this king lives in a country almost completely separate from the rest of the world, and because he does not know other countries' systems or customs, he has a certain narrowness which we Europeans do not have, of course. You will find it difficult to believe what happened next. Sir, I said, I'd like to give you something to thank you for your kindness to me since I've arrived at the palace. 300 or 400 years ago, we Europeans discovered how to make special powder. When you set it to fire, it burns and explodes immediately, with a noise louder than thunder. Shoot heavy balls out of metal from large guns. It can also destroy the largest ships. It can kill a whole army. It can cut a man's body in half. It can destroy the strongest wall. It is called gunpowder. And it's easy and cheap to make. To show how grateful I am to you, I am offering to explain how to make it. Then you will be able to destroy all your enemies. I was surprised by the king replied. No, he cried in honor. Don't tell me. I don't want to know how you to murder people like that. I would rather give half my country away than knows the secret of this powder. How can a tiny creature like you have such inhuman, cruel ideas? Never speak to me of this again. How strange that an excellent king should not take the chance I was offering him. No European king would hesitate for a moment, but he had no other strange ideas. He believed very simply that every problem can be solved by honest, sensible people, and that the political life of a country must have no secrets and must be open for all to see and understand. Of course, we know that this is impossible, so perhaps this option of us is not worth considering. I was still hoping to return to England one day, but the ship in which I'd arrived in Brobdingnag was the first that had ever come near the coast, so I could not see how could I get away. I began to think more ideas and more about my family and my home. By now I've been in Brobdingnag for about 2 years. So when the king and queen traveled me to the south coast in Glumdalclitch, and I went with them. I really wanted to be close to the sea again, which I had not seen or even smelt for so long. As Glumdalclitch was ill, I asked a young servant to take me down to the beach for some fresh air. The boy carried me in the traveling box and put me down on the beach. While he was looking for birds' eggs among the rocks, I looked sadly at the sea but stayed in my box. And after a while, I slept. I was awoken suddenly when my box was lifted high in the air. I could only suppose that a large bird took a hold of the ring on top of the box with his talons and flew away with it. Through the windows, I could see the sky and clouds. Then I was falling so that I felt breathless. There was a loud crash as the box fell into the sea. Perhaps the bird had been attacked by other, and so had to drop what he was carrying. Luckily, the box was been well made, and not much sea water came in. But I do not think any traveler has been in a worse situation than I was then. Then I wondered how long I could survive with no food or drink in the middle of the ocean. I felt I sure never see the poor Glumdalclitch again, and I knew how sad she would be to lose me. Several hours passed, and then I suddenly heard a strange noise above my head. People were fastening a rope to the ring. Then my box was pulled to the water. Was it a ship that was pulling me along? Help! Help! I shouted as loudly as I could. I was delighted to hear English voices reply. Who's there? They cried. I'm English, I shouted back desperately. Please help me to get out of here. Just put your finger into the ring on top of the box and lift it out of the water. Quickly! There were great shouts of laughter. He's mad, I heard one man say. 10 men couldn't lift that huge box, said another. There was more laughter. Indeed, because I had been with giants for so long, I had forgotten my own countrymen were small as me. The only thing the sailors could not cut a hole in the top of my box and help me to climb out. I was exhausted and unable to walk far. They took me to their captain. Welcome to my ship, he kindly said. You're lucky we found you. My men saw that huge box on the water and we decided to pull it along behind the ship. Then we realized there was a man inside. Why are you locked up in there? Was it a punishment for some terrible crime? But tell me all about it later. Now you need to sleep and then eat. When I told him my story a few hours later, he found it was difficult to believe, but after a while he began to accept that what I told him must be true. But why did you shout so loudly? He asked. We can hear you perfectly if you can speak normally. You see, I explained for 2 years I had to shout to make myself understood by the giants. I was like a man in the street who was trying to talk to another man at the top of a very tall building. And another thing, your sailors all seem very small to me because I've been used to looking up at people 20 meters tall. He shook his head and, well, that's a story. I think you should write a book about it when you get home. I stayed on the ship for several months as we sailed slowly to home to England. Finally, we arrived in Bristol on 3rd June 1706. When I reached home, my wife bade me promised never to go to the sea again, and thought my adventures had come to an end.